And we're here today in the Brookings studio with Keith Nichols, owner's rep at DKNQ. Keith, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Good. Matt's here, of course.
Hello. Hey, Matt.
Today we're going to talk about some industry things, some LED video walls, and how they can integrate in different applications. But first, Keith, can we start with your origin story and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you're at today?
Well, born in Canada, so it's a little cold up there, much like Brookings. So, yeah, we're associated in some way. I started as always tinkering when I was a kid. So, when one of those overactive kids, and picked up electronics and did all that stuff, and kind of found my way after a while, which was always doing electronics and everything like that. Ended up doing a lot of concert stuff to make some money. Did some DJing. And it kind of got very diverse because I just needed to do something. Went and did engineering, got my degree, and then headed out to doing more concerts. I ended up that I loved it, but it wasn't a career path. So I ended up with a company called Suite of Canada, which was point of sale. And it was very interesting, the data at that time that the grocery stores had and everything like that, but it wasn't enough for me. And I ended up traveling 300 days a year across Canada. So by the time you got from one side, because Canada's massive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so by the time you get to one side of the country, you're headed to the other side. So Vancouver to Newfoundland, back and forth, and that's all I did. And that ended up there was a company called Micros. And Micros is a big United States company right now, bought by Oracle, massive company at the end. But I started that with them doing the programming for that and did the French translation from English to French so that they can sell it in Quebec. Mm-hmm. And Quebec was the only one that had casinos at that time. Okay. So there was casinos in Quebec, and we needed to do a translation. That turned out to be, like a big thing, but Micros didn't have a way to do a liquor interface. And by law in Canada, in order to comp a check, you had to have the guest check rung up by the liquor gun. Okay. Made that chip, and that's kind of got me back to tinkering. So it was very interesting then. Right now, yeah. Now my juices are flowing and things are going. So, anyways, that chip ended up going kind of viral in today's world, right? It went around everywhere. Mm-hmm. Ended up in a bunch of countries. I got called I was traveling around 300 days a year and doing this, wasn't building, I was kind of just more of like an owner's rep, but more for point of sale in all the casinos. So installing the stuff, project managing, doing all that stuff. And then Canada took off with some casinos in Ontario. And then they eventually did some stadiums out in Vancouver. I did in GM Place. And we had a bunch of liquor guns there because they still needed to control the liquor. Yeah. Right. Mm. And then that chip ended up in the Bahamas. And I got a call from this guy. It was a weird call. It was just, I don't even know how he got my number. He just says, we got a problem with this stuff. I said, what stuff would that be? He says, well, it doesn't work with the gun. I said, okay, well, I'll help you, And then eventually it turned out that he said, you got to come here. I said, well, I don't, I'm not really doing service calls in the Bahamas from Canada, but right. I'll have a go at it. That's a big of a trip. Yeah, I'll have a go at it. Right? So there were some management issues at my company, and I just couldn't travel 300 days a year. So I kept telling him, this is tiring, mm-hmm. Right? And I went down there and met a guy after I fixed it in 15 minutes or less. I spent the weekend in the Bahamas on their tab and having a good time at the beach and the bar. And that's I ended up with a guy that at the bar, and he said, why don't you come over and take a look? And there was this Unix coding, so I started fixing his printers and on Micros. Mm-hmm. And it was this Unix Micros, so I fixed his printer, cleared his printer jams and all this stuff. And he just started talking to me. And then he called me later and said, after I went back to Canada, and said, I need you to come down here again. I said, well, again, I don't do service calls in the Bahamas, but okay, right. If you're offering a free trip, yeah. I'm in again because I need some more vacation time. Yeah. Right? So that ended up with this guy says, I want you to help me do this. And he pulled out this big set of drawings. And it was like, biggest set of drawings I've ever seen. And I said, this? He says, yeah. I said, well, it's like Disney World in the Bahamas. He says, yeah, exactly. I said, And it turned out that it was Atlantis Casino. Uh-huh. Oh, wow. And so he offered me a job. I was having management issues at Suite, and I left on July 1st, Canada Day, and never paid taxes again.
That's pretty good. You answered those phone calls when you didn't know who the person was. It seemed to pay off pretty good.
Well, because you were getting called, because I was literally across Canada, so I had one of those big Motorola cell phones, and people were just calling because they had problems, and I didn't know the number. It wasn't that way at that time, So it was kind of cool. So that's kind of the history, and then that ended up to being, rolling into leaving the Bahamas eventually after 8 years of running the island there, which gave me a lot of experience on just because it's a city.
Yep.
Right? You don't have anything, right? There's everything you get is what you went there with.
So you were there from the start of those. So you said when you brought in the books and everything, and you pointed out this, you were there from the beginning.
From the beginning, all the way through.
Nice.
So all the way through, and then I eventually became the VP of technology there, going through that and acting CIO, and that. I did that for 8 years, and it's just it's very difficult to live on an island and do that stuff because of all that. It's not. There's no instant gratification, right? The gas station's out of gas. The McDonald's is out of fries. Subway is out of buns. They don't make their own. I mean,
it's going to be a while till you get it.
Yeah. So it becomes island time real quick, and all your friends sometimes are 5 days because they're vacationers, right? So you have a great time, meet a lot of great people, but there's no sustainable thing for me personally. So
sounds better than it is sometimes. Is that kind of saying like you think living in the Bahamas sounds very very relaxing, but
there's only certain people that could live in that environment, right?
Yeah.
And you have to have a different mindset, right? And you have to, the same people that can go to the golf course day and day and day and day and day. Then that's a person, right?
Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad.
No, it isn't bad. It's just, I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just, I wanted more, right? The stimulation was still there. Maybe now I could do it, but then the stimulation wasn't there.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So you had to have that mindset that, okay, this is my mindset living on an island. And then you said you eventually led to other things. Was that like in Las Vegas, or how did you move on?
Well, so then I just started looking for more things, and I kind of forced the company to get me over to the United States because Atlantis had a head office because we could only have so many expats on the island, and I was one of 5, right? And so the head office was there. I eventually started going to the head office and saying, look, I need a succession plan out of that. We need to transition to someone else going over there. I need to come here and do that stuff. And management was, again, changing as they do in companies, and it was working out. I kind of got the thing started, but it didn't end up that way. So I had to start a company and then get over and immigrate into America, and that's when DKNQ became, more prominent. I already had the name in the company because it was a retail company that was doing some entrepreneur stuff on the side.
Okay.
But I just decided that someone said, well, why don't you do some consulting, Keith? I said, well, okay. I guess. So that was the only way to get the visas and do the stuff. So that's what I started. And then I got on with a company called Delaware North. Some people know it. They do a lot of stadiums, a lot of food service stuff. Like they're probably the largest food service supplier for concession stands in the world, or one of. There's basically 3. There's Levy Restaurants, there's Delaware North, and there's Compass Group. And those 3 pretty much run all stadiums in America and the world.
Okay.
It's pretty big.
So this moves you into consulting then at DKNQ. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, does it stand for something, or kind of what is DKNQ?
Well, it was really just a retail bag, right? I was making bags, and I'd just grab letters like DNY, DNQ, something like that, and that's just, put it together. And there was at that time there was the .com stuff. I could grab a 4-letter .com. And it's pretty popular, right? Or it's worth money just as a 4-letter com right now, So I kept it and went on with that, and so it was hard. It's hard putting the stuff together, right?
Yeah.
As a how do I get licensing? How do I do this stuff? I mean, you could spend half a year just doing the paperwork to get this established, and you're like, I'm not making any money. I don't know. I got this .com over there. Let's use that. There you go. So that's kind of how it went, and then like I say, Delaware North started doing stuff. I was consulting with them, and then started stadiums. Right, that was the stadium because they owned all the stadiums. They did all the concessions for the stadiums, and then I just started consulting and being owners reps and things for that. And then it kind of I needed to be busy, so they kept me busy with kind of the food service piece. But then I needed to expand, right? Yeah. Because I saw, oh well, look at that. There's a recording studio underneath there, and they do that over there, and there's water sprinklers, and there's all this stuff in stadiums, right? And that led to just doing more for the owners, and I eventually meet them and we have conversations, and that ended up to being a full-fledged kind of IT, AV, and then the AV tailed back in because I did that when I was younger at concerts, right?
Okay.
So that's how it all tiled in.
Yeah,
It all comes around to stuff. So you,
Stuff,
you
yeah.
started with a call where you said, I need help with stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now you looked around and go, there's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, there's a lot of things,
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
But it was all technological stuff, right? So when you were doing the consulting, was it like the chip part of it in the concession stand, or was it like different displays behind concession stands and then expanded to more technology stuff?
Well, it was kind of the point of sale because that was the roots, right?
Okay.
And the thing because of the Canadian thing. And then it
Yep.
went to, can we do this, right, with the point of sale and put it on a display? Can we move it to this? And then we had an interesting thing that I started making, which is back to the juices of things, right? So the biggest problem, or one of the problems with stadiums is in baseball, as an example. So opening day, Brewers, they come in and they have like literally 8 trucks of hot dogs in the loading bay because they do dollar hot dog day, right, on certain days. So,
Okay.
it's crazy the amount of hot dogs. So what you need to know is that if people didn't buy in the stands and you open a concession stand on 305 and you got all the hot dogs up there, you can't move it during the game because
Once it's there, it's
it's
there,
there.
kind of thing?
You're-
It's there.
So if that one's not selling any hot dogs, you're kind of toast.
Oh, wow. So you really got to be strategic as to which stand gets what.
So kind of this thing, you come into, so now we made this thing that kind of did, hey, when that guy scans his ticket, where's he going? So we can start seeing the stand fill up automatically, and we can pre-send hot dogs to that thing because that area is getting more populated.
Yeah.
And that just came back to it went to the consulting. I need to do more than just, this point of sale and this thing. And then that led to talking to owners, hey, we can do different technology. We can do that for the stadiums. And then eventually I rolled into the stadium tour, I call it the tour. It kind of ended because they weren't building anymore and doing any stuff. And then the casino started up.
Okay.
And the casino guys, they usually reach out because owners of stadiums and owners of things usually hang out with other people that are of that level,
Right.
C-suite level, and then they call me, right?
Okay.
Said, hey, could you do this? And I said, yeah, you can go. And I got onto a Indian casino in Buffalo, New York, which is Seneca. And there was one developer that was there that knew me, and he hired me to do a big renovation in their stadium, they had a stadium and then they had a casino, and it actually was an amphitheater or I forget what it was. There was a big theater they turned over into a casino, and they did it virtually overnight. But we did a lot of renovation there, and I was there for like 4 years, and it's interesting how all players and you get that in your vertical, right? People know people that are all in that vertical. So that's how the sales kind of gels. Well, it's the same for me.
Yeah. And I suppose when you were talking about having these conversations with owners or the stadium owners, you probably mentioned your background of obviously what you did in the Bahamas and the casino background that you had. So then when they start looking at that, your name came to that.
It's the same conversation we're having today,
Yep.
right? Is it that hey, what do you how do you do it? What do you do? How did you become from where you were?
Yep.
And they say, I could use a guy like you, right? And then it turns over to a guy, and that's the way it works. It really works that way. And that turned out, eventually at the Seneca to, do you want to go do MGM? Because I know this guy at MGM, and I literally in Buffalo had a little trailer on the back of my Audi, and it's typical in your West things that you put a trailer hitch on the back of an Audi.
Okay.
It's not normal, right?
Right.
Only in
picturing it,
Buffalo.
yeah.
Only in Buffalo is into that. So I put a trailer on there, loaded up my bed and thing, and I was headed back to Florida because that's where I lived essentially while I was traveling around because I came from the Bahamas across there, and that's where all my friends were. So I was taking my trailer back from Buffalo there, and he said, "Why don't you stop in Washington D.C.?" I stopped there. I literally backed up the trailer, put it into the garage, and met this guy, and he said, I think you need to come help us. I said, well, what are you doing again? He pulls out these plans, same kind of thing, right? And here we go again. And he pulled out the plans to what is now National Harbor, MGM National Harbor in Washington, D.C., or Maryland, it's technically, but it's very close to Washington, D.C. And, I built that with him. And then at that point, it's very unusual in my field to have the 3 verticals, I call it. So IT infrastructure, surveillance infrastructure, and AV infrastructure.
Okay.
So there's some people that are experts in AV, some people are experts in IT, and some people are experts in the surveillance. There's not a lot of owners, or I don't know of any that do it, and that's what really gets me going.
Are those pillars kind of, you would say, for casinos and stadiums that applies to?
Yeah,
Or just kind of?
yeah, mostly. It's really big in the casinos because you have a lot of gaming compliances with the surveillance,
Yeah.
and then a lot of compliances in the IT for the credit card and things like that.
Oh,
so,
I suppose.
Sure.
So that does it, and then you start playing with juices again, which leads back to now the AV ties into the displays and what can we do to generate revenue, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask it, like, what's the stuff that you're actually helping them with? Is it a lot of, like you said, those 3 different pillars? Is it across all 3 that you're working on? And what are you seeing as like the constant component across multiple venues?
Some people ask me what my job is.
Yeah.
Right?
What would you say you do here?
And I say the only way I could come up with it is that I own anything with a wire that won't kill you, and anything that's associated to that any wire that will. So an example of that is I own the TV, the data that goes to the TV, and I own the power that goes to that TV or display. So the power will kill you, but I own it because it's associated to the data that's there. But I don't own the generator.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Right? So
I
that.
appreciate you explaining it down to us like this.
Yeah, let me break it down.
No, that's good.
And I think this kind of ties into like one of the topics we want to talk about today is obviously with casinos and then stadiums and arenas is sportsbooks. So maybe could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing? I mean, you've been with a casino. It's like casino life sounds maybe a little more dramatic than it is.
Yeah, glamorous.
There you go.
Casino life that you've had. But maybe talk about sportsbooks and maybe even when did you start seeing that become a bigger deal in casinos?
Well, and you look at it like, when you start up in like a place like Buffalo, which is great, and they start building, getting money to produce better product, right? And with that product, you start seeing, what's really going on and what do we really build? And is it a restaurant? Is it a water park? Is it this? And you started seeing, the horse track stuff kind of started going away a little bit, right? Because there used to be just massive places where they had cubicles of people betting on horses. And I think, people started going and looking at this and saying, I got all this square footage. How do I make more money? Because the only person's there is between like 8 and 5, but he doesn't gamble, he doesn't go to the nightclub, he doesn't do this stuff. How does that change? And I think some of the regulations started changing. People were working on that, and then said we can bet on that football, and then it flashed, right? They said all this square footage is for what? Because no one's here at night, right? And it's still a little bit of that because they have to figure out some of the stuff on the football thing, right? Because it's only at a certain time in a certain season and to get people there all the time.
Right.
But that flashed into starting to working on all kinds of displays and different ways to do it. And the betting was, how do we make more revenue, right? And the people that were professionals that started consulting with me to say, hey, how do we do something different? And we started seeing that change.
And with that square footage that you're talking about, are they saying we need to put a display here, or we have a display here that's showing different things? What are they looking for there?
It's more engagement, right? How do you get the customer to stay longer and spend more, right? And if you look at there's Derek Stevens at Circa, he had a great vision, right? And he had a place called DNLV, which some people know, some people don't, but he basically bought a lot in the middle of downtown Vegas when it wasn't really downtown Vegas. It was pretty rough down there. Okay. And he owned it outside there, and he did test runs of how do I put, something up there to fill this lot, and he had picnic tables, and he put up stands and a thing. Incredible vision, and he put up a pool, like a Mr. Turtle pool, but life size, and sold tickets to it. And I couldn't believe that he was selling tickets to this Mr. Turtle pool, going in this thing. I don't know who was going to that pool, but I wasn't, right? They were actually going in there and selling it, right? And so that was his vision to build what is now Circa, and it knocked it out of the park. And those type of guys, you want to be associated with to bring better experiences, and that comes back to the the AV and how do we get more encompassing sound, and how do we get things there that are more visually appealing and make it work, right?
And even it was like you were saying, it was a bunch of kiosks when it was the horse races.
Yeah.
So it's even, whether you get the display up there for obviously betting information, odds, watching things, but then it's not. It eventually goes to not cubicles, right? All of a sudden, it's all right. How can I get everyone to kind of watch things and?
Well, you got the daddy lounger, right? You're tilted back, you're kicking back. You got someone serving you alcohol versus this. When I went to check out the stuff when we were talking about this, I would check out the cubicle, and there's the old McDonald's wrapper in the thing, and I can't see over the cubicle to see the TV I want to watch because it's meant to watch the racing here and go run to the the thing in bed. Now it's, on our app. We take all that away and we start, really engaging the customer on a, microsecond level.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking then when these things start to happen, and I mean, you will need this is not a shameless plug for Daktronics displays, but you're obviously going to need a display as these sports books get bigger like this to be able to handle all the information and all the different sports. It seems there's more and more sports that come out that you can bet on every year, but it's like, what are some of the, I would say must-haves, but we've already mentioned you can't just have kiosks, but are there like certain things that when you go into a sports book to start with, you have like a checklist maybe or something of must-haves that they need to do?
I think it's working with the owner. I think some of it is must-haves in the sense that, people want odds, that the odds need to be live up there and putting that data back there. And that comes back to, buying the right partner that can put those kind of technologies together and working with those type of partners to do it up where they have it. Because, companies, and I think I said this cliche before, or we said it once there, where, sometimes things can be bought in China, but this display business is not one of them, right? And the reason for that is because you need a partner that's been living here, doing here, seeing the culture, and understanding how to share ideas. Because, if you go to that stadium over there and you've done it over there, you can get the data back from the individuals, the people, and say, this is what they're doing over there, and how do you either make it better or do it differently, right? And that's where the Derek Stevens of the world start, really hammering the home because they're entrepreneurs. They push stuff out, and it's awesome. From that perspective, and you get all that stuff in the technology, and I've done a lot of stuff, right?
Yep.
And
there it is again.
Yeah, it is again. And you look at it like, I build IT data centers, and there's so many criteria, checklist this, checklist. I mean, it's sometimes overwhelming, ridiculous, right? Like, why don't we do that for displays? It's going on at Super Bowl. It's going on in this guy's business. It's now going to be $1 trillion business, right? Why are we not doing that? Why would you want to buy in China when you can't have the reliability and the credibility of it? You want to buy local. And so when there's a problem, and I think I wasn't Derek, Greg Stevens said that, where he said, if I have a problem, I can get on a plane and I can talk to the engineers that built it and get the data to fix the problem of my mission critical business, because that's what it is now.
Yeah.
So long gone are the day. You probably could have bought China 20 years ago and not had a problem. To me, it's mission critical.
Yeah, and you're talking about all these different projects and the displays and how you get involved with those projects. How do you decide what kind of displays you're going to put in those certain areas, or what kind of stuff you're going to bring into this space when you're creating it?
So some of it, depending on the owner, it's really owner driven. Some of it's budget driven, but some of it's owner driven. And that is, if you have people that allow you to bring things to the table and budgetless, and then eventually curtail it, then you can bring ideas, right? And an example, I can't really disclose what we're working on right now, but we're working on a pretty incredible sports book that has a new type of look, feel, and it's going to be different than anywhere else. And that is because I presented an idea to the owner, and the owner bought in. And I think it's going to reveal by the end of this year, and we're going to see something super special. It'll be just like Circa in the sense of it. It's going to be special, where Circa had cascading pools and watching things from a pool, which is unheard of. It's nowhere in the world. It's one of the best sports book in the world. It is right now currently, and that kind of stuff. You work with architects, you work with owners that do it. Sometimes it curtails in wrong ways. I don't want to say necessarily bad ways, but you got this constraints of lots of people putting input. And, I don't know if you've ever gone to dinner with 14 people and never decide where you're going. You kind of never go anywhere. So I like going to dinner with 14 people, know where they're going after they've picked where it is. So when you got a direct owner like a Derek Stevens or a Greg Stevens, great people that say, hey, I did Mr. Turtle Pool over here. I want a big size of it, and this is what I do. And then he comes to people like myself and say, how do we make this happen? And then we look at sound and areas and angles and viewing and what do you want to do? And he comes back later after we got kind of things laid out, and we show him, and he says, let's tweak it a little bit here. That kind of thing.
Okay.
So do you usually come in, I would say it's at the beginning, because most of these examples you have given is when someone comes to you with an idea, or you come to them with an idea and you help build it up. Has anyone ever come to you with like an existing sports book or casino and say, how do we make this better? Or are you always kind of like on the, let's say, renovation or newer construction side? Have you ever come in like after the fact?
Yeah, sometimes I
Sounds
do.
like bar rescue, but like
yes.
help us, Keith.
Stadium
We can't figure
rescue.
this out. Yeah.
We're drowning. I think sometimes it's it is kind of that all the time. It is a renovation because what the guys realize now, back when I was at Atlantis, they kind of, the development guys kind of treated me like they didn't need me, right? Because that was the era where it's a phone on the wall. We'll call you when we need to make a call, right?
Yeah.
Then you put the phone in, right? Just come set it up. And when we need the point of sale, when there's a customer there, we'll call you when we need to put it on the counter, right? Now, you can't do anything without me,
Yeah.
right? So between furniture and me, we own almost 100% of the building. So you can't sit on anything and you can't watch anything without the stuff I put in. So it's imperative. So what happens with the architects is they kind of get over their skis and they start designing this, mega complex
Yeah.
and how does it look? And they go, well, we need a guy that does stuff.
Yeah.
Get all the stuff together.
Yeah. So that works.
stuff guy.
Yeah, that just works in my favor now because again, now it's not just it's not a casino with technology in it. It's a technology casino, right? And that's with owners. Once they figure that out, they seek out people like myself to be able to do that.
Yeah, you make it feasible for them. They've got these ideas, and you come in and say, okay, we need infrastructure in place to make this actually happen, or like look at this idea and say this is feasible, or this one we might need to tweak, and you kind of make it something that's possible.
And there's all the other stuff that adds to it, right? Viewing angles. What's the where is it going to go? The sound is key now in these sport books. I mean, we were going to touch on that to do it. The sound is, very hard for me to manage because you have now these very hard surfaces that are massive. And what do you do? Because now they want sound, right? They want surround sound. They want thunder. They want, they want to feel the football coming at them and hitting this stuff. And that's where we're seeing some, nuances of that stuff, right? Is how do we make the experience, And Sphere is going to do some of that this year, right? Sphere is making a whole round ball that's got LED everywhere, right? On the power and all the stuff that it takes. It's massive. And how do you get sound and Wi-Fi and cameras in a thing where it's all glass?
Works and not overwhelming too to everybody.
Well,
like
just all of that, right? How do you get the sound to someone in a circle? Forget about the hard surfaces of the LED, right? And they have like some incredible, things that are going to come out there, or we're going to start seeing transparent type sound.
Yeah.
And throwing directional. And there's some great things like Meyer that do a lot of, casting of sound and direct sound, and we're seeing some incredible stuff coming out of that because it's also encompassing that sportsbook feel.
Yeah.
It's like maximizing the technology that's there today too. Have you seen some of the change in technology over the years since the Bahamas till today?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. You used to have a phone that was there with a cord and a little ringy-dingy, right?
Yeah, the Motorola.
Yeah. They do the thing. Most of it now, I'm not sure where we're going to head with some of the cloud stuff, right? Because there's still a lot of this mission critical things that happen in a stadium, and some of them is back to the same thing. I got a controller that controls the display, right? I don't want it to be a cloud because if I get cut off, that display is going off. If it's Super Bowl, we're toast, right? You can't repeat the event.
You're going to restart the router.
You can't tell them to kick off again and start over.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It just doesn't work that way. So that's some of the major changes. We had this whole push to, hey, everything's in the cloud, go to AWS. We've seen that with AWS failing, right? It was a big deal, right? All these websites went down, they controlled the stuff, and that's when all the casinos went, whoa, we can't be over there, right? All of us. So I'm still building data centers, still doing some of the same stuff I did before, and that helps.
So when you already mentioned a couple things like looking at viewing distances, viewing angles of different things, when it comes to an LED wall in a sports book, what are some of the things you look for to know which one to pick?
Well, we've done it a few different ways. A lot of it's, where the person's going to sit. And we have like some really good technology in the AutoCAD business now where you can, put people in places, not much like Ticketmaster or any of that stuff. But all that depends on the quality of the LED. And back to the data points. I mean, DAC has an incredible lab that pushes through stuff and compares LEDs and does all kinds of, science to it, right? When I'm buying it from somewhere else, I'm not sure I have the data. I know I don't, right? I don't have the data where that is. What lot is that LED? Where did it come from? How did it get here? And if it isn't right, how do I fix it?
Yep.
I don't know if I have the whole LED. I mean, we're talking about, millions of dollars here. We're not talking about just a TV that you hang on the wall and you can go to Best Buy and say, hey, this is, I'll just replace that, my LG with my Samsung and, pick between the two. That's the infrastructure. It's all the stuff. We're talking, even if I buy an LED for $7 million, I'll probably have $20 million in infrastructure, and that's a huge deal, right? And if you can't figure out, pinpoint the problem with the people you do, and we have problems. There's always problems when you build new construction, and we've had some disasters, and people that are local and people that are there, and especially DAC from a partner perspective, in that regard, just can step up because they have all those resources, right?
Yep.
They're there. They're doing that. You're not buying it online. You're not doing it stuff, and it's not just the LED of the week, and that's important.
Yeah, and I mean, they say it's like a big TV, but we always say you can't just hit an on button and then everything works, right? You've got to have something behind it to run it. What are you using to run it on the back end, like the control?
Well, and that's actually, a huge science in trying to. It's really hard to get the operation guys to say what do you want, right? And you have to coach them to say, give them flavors. It's almost like picking, going somewhere and picking out some furniture. It's very difficult to do unless you say, hey, here's the 3-seater, here's the 4-seater, right? Which one would you like? Which color would you like? If you don't do that, you'll be there forever. And we do a lot of that in the background with all the data that goes in there and saying, hey, how many, in tour sports books, and say how many racetracks do you want to watch, how many football games at the same time. And we all know when it gets to March Madness and things like this, there's a maximum, it tops out, but you need to be at that maximum.
Yep.
And how are we going to window it? And again, good partners. Analog Way is one of the ones that we use to drive all that stuff. They're great partners to be able to do it. They do the most matrixing that we can do it. It feeds the systems and the ecosystems to the LEDs to make sure that this all works and reliable. Back to the same thing. If I got a show controller that doesn't do anything at the end of the day and it fails, I got a problem, right? The LED is useless. It's rendered useless. So again, we go through all those systems and make sure we diligently pick what is driving it properly.
And I've heard sometimes from people too, if it's an LED wall versus say an LCD wall, even when you're having these conversations of how many sports do you want on here, how do you zone it out for betting information, other live sports, you're able to create, multiple different things, right? You could all of a sudden have it be one screen is bigger, right? Their zone is bigger for a higher level profile game that's going on, but is that kind of how you get involved too then? There's how many different looks? Because I'm thinking of sports stadiums are always saying oh, we want a full screen look and then an in-game look and a sponsor look. Are you kind of doing that too with the board when it's on? How many different ones you're going to have?
Again, back to coaching, right? Because if you give someone a paintbrush and just paint the whole landscape painting they want, unless they're an artist that does that regularly, it's going to be a bad painting.
Yep.
Right? And so we don't want to do that. But there are certain entrepreneurs like Derek Stevens, right, that have a vision of what they're doing. They've also test driven it over somewhere else where they've put up a bunch of TVs and kind of changed it around and had a different, whatever. Apple TV, a bunch of cables, a bunch of laptops, and they're trying to do this, at jerry rig it together, and then that's the vision, right? And we replicate that. So coaching them into that scenario, and there's only so much people can endure, right? If you can play 300 different channels up there, but
You can be able to see them enough.
does anybody
to
want to watch that? I
What's
personally
the over-under on that one? I can't tell.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? Yeah. They got the little odd ticker tape going down at the bottom. You can't see it, and it takes about 3 years to go by. So, we just don't want that. So that's a lot of the coaching to make that happen,
Yeah, and you mentioned the infrastructure a couple different times, and you even mentioned architects from the beginning. Is that a bigger consideration as well, like the structural support of something, or they want to put this huge video wall right here? Does that have to work with the architecture, with the framing, and make sure everything kind of works together to pull that together?
It's huge. The LED is one thing, and picking, again, back to the great partner to work with, if you're working with someone overseas in a different time zone and a different thing, to wake up at 12 o'clock and try and make a phone call to somewhere overseas and figure out what size of structure or how weight it is on the piece, it's a problem. And it's probably in a magnitude of double or triple of what the LED costs, the string. So we need to get somewhere where it's lighter, but we can still do the customization that we have today, right? right?
Sure.
And that it's, I say this about a TV. If you just take an example of a TV, a TV, if I can derive the price from any, company X down $50 on a hotel room for 200 rooms, it doesn't mean anything because I got a data jack that's $1,500. I got a mount that's $500. I got a wall mount that's there, and I got labor that's doing that. So the TV's a rounding error, right? At that point. So we need to get somewhere with that, and the building is also there. Like if you look at Circa, it's a massive undertaking to put that display up, and you're talking about 2 floors and putting a hole through the floor and getting the angles there. It's heavy.
Yeah, it's all just got to work together. Like you said, that holistic view. If they've got that full view of the idea, it kind of helps bring everything together from the get-go.
It does, and you get the architects that it's a little bit of a clash sometimes because they want it pretty, but it's not functional.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And some of this, and just a recent install of stuff I did, incredible sound we did in this room, and the architect said, I want, velvet curtains. I said, well, that's a challenge, right? Because he put velvet curtains in front of the speakers. They typically don't work like that. Right. So that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And it's part of those stages, and it's the same thing of viewing angles, right? When we were back to viewing angles, Circa was very difficult to do 2 stages with a big display, and we realized after a while where, Derek wanted like all these windows because it's a kid in a candy store all of a sudden, right? He wants all these windows, but when you look at it in reality, if you go up to the upper floor, you can't see the bottom one unless you're hanging over the edge, so you only have half the display. So it actually became not vertical this way, it became split this way to make it make sense.
Sure.
And that took time to draw out, and that's what I sit with the owners to make happen.
Does some of that come up then during the, let's say, the sketching or drawing phases when you start thinking of it, and is an adjustment after it's installed and used for a while, and you're like, oh, people are actually looking at it this way or using it this way, we need to adjust something?
Yeah, spot on, and that's why you're always through the whole life cycle, right? Guys like me,
You're not just done once it's installed and you're out.
You can't be because it's a life cycle. We didn't notice that you couldn't see that way, even though we had all the computers and the technology in there, that you couldn't see over that, I call it the bucket where the slot machines are, until we were physically there.
Yep.
I mean, we had examples of it up for weeks before, and it was like, whoa, this is a challenge, right? And we spent all our time like, what windows and showing Derek and all these PowerPoint presentations and all that stuff, and it all went in about 4 seconds when we walked over the edge and went, wow, that's a problem.
That's a problem. That's like we always say in sports, our customers almost always, we say, is the first year they have a new install, the layout and look of the board is almost always going to change the following year, because when they put in something brand new, then they hear from people like, I didn't see enough replays, or it was too small, there's too many ads, or whatever it might be. So it's always like the looks change, even though you put in plenty of renderings and sketches ahead of time. It's once it starts being used, then you seem to get a lot more feedback than you did earlier on, and then you make adjustments year after year.
Yeah, customer feedback's huge. And then the other part is you don't have a full building, right? Sound does this a lot. Right, we were sitting there, and in Circa, and I remember we were just blasting this stuff like it was thunderous, right?
Yep.
And Derek wanted it more. And now he loves loud music, but he wanted more, and it wasn't audible, so it was hard to make that. And then when we filled the place and started doing it, the audible came out,
So we've been talking about a bunch of different details that go into it and how everything needs to work together, from infrastructure to technology and what that technology entails, even sound as a different aspect of it. What do you kind of see on the horizon for Sportsbooks or these casino type spaces for technology?
I think we're going to see, bigger, brighter, I wouldn't say necessarily louder, but more encompassing type experiences. Whether it's a Top Golf or a type of, more interactive. I mean, if you've ever been to Top Golf, they got Angry Birds, right? And they hammer it. It's incredible, right? And how do we get that type of thing in sports? Because I wouldn't go to Top Golf just to hit it into the holes anymore, but I love Angry Birds, right? And it's just more, and because it encompasses everybody, and we got to get those more people involved, and I think they're trying to do that, right? How do you get the person that doesn't bet? Because I don't bet regularly. I'm not spending 14 hours studying what player was born and whether his mother and father did X as a child and all this stuff that these guys do, which doesn't mean anything anyways, because the lady that throws the thing at the dartboard has a better stat than just like stocks, right?
Right.
So I think we're going to see that. The sound is also key. It's hard to get sound right now encompassing in front because it physically, visually blocks something, right? So how do I put it behind the display? How do I get it the display's breathing sound? You know, that's really for me what I think is the next step on those things. How do I get these hard surfaces to work? How do I get it to push to the guest? You know, and you know, Sphere's doing some stuff where they're shaking the seats and sending all kinds of
It's like a 4D theater where they're.
I was just going to say that.
Well, smells, right? They're doing smells and they're doing stuff
Yeah.
like that, and then water and all this. These things that come out of the seats, and I'm not sure that's going to work out, right? Because I don't know if I want to be at a concert and get water from a seat. I just
I did San Diego Zoo. A family and I went, and they did like it was the 4D thing of Rio, and there was the same thing. The seats moved, and all of a sudden when they all splashed in the movie, they'd spray water in your face and stuff.
And then wind would come up.
But it was only like 20 minutes. It wasn't the whole movie, so it was kind of cool for a while. But I don't know if that was for a concert, if I would feel the same.
If I'm in a music park, I'm kind of expecting that, right? I like that because I'm engaged. But at a concert or a thing, and I just U2 concert, someone's gonna throw some water at me.
I'm already engaged.
No, I'm not doing that, right?
So maybe without giving anything away from what you actually do, could you give any tips for people that are looking to implement technology into these spaces as well?
Well, I'm happy to give anything. I'm a consultant, right? So I can give lots away.
Without not charging somebody, right?
Secret one.
Well, I think that you really have to have a direction of what you want within reason, right? These things are not infrastructure money friendly. We have a fairly large place going in right now with some, a very new concept in a bar type environment, and the steel is heavy.
Yeah.
I'm putting it up long before, and if that plan doesn't work out, it's going to go inherently bad, right? And I'm not going to be able to get a steel guy up there at the last minute just to make some tweaks.
Sure.
Right? So you really have to have a plan. I think that's lay out some sort of plan.
Sure.
And there's lots of guys that do sketches really well, visionary type stuff that you can even hire a guy on the internet, Fiverr or anything like that.
Say Fiverr, Upwork.
To do a concept, right?
Yeah.
Because these type of people just think differently, right? I'm not that think differently guy in that regard because my business is logic. Right?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's logical, so it's hard to get me out of that. But I do, right? It's hard jumping out of that suit. So I think that would be the number one is what do you want to do? And Derek, we made this thing come to life.
Sure.
Derek Stevens, because he had tested it, he had a vision, and we knocked it out of the park.
Awesome.
I mean that's probably the best. Right now it's the biggest sports book in the world. That thing is just it's sick.
I need to get out there and see that. I've seen a lot. We promoted a lot on our end for marketing, for pictures and videos, and
We'll get there eventually.
It's the only thing you can do is to maybe take out the slot machines on the top and make it a Top Golf on the top and smack it at people. I don't know, but I say, and Derek's the only one that could probably do that and get away with it because it's in Fremont Street. But that's that's kind of what I would do. And then you really have to think about all the infrastructure to do that. These things, the brighter they get, the more dense they get, the more power they take. This is not, if you look at like a Tesla supercharger, everybody says, well, we're going to put in a Tesla supercharger. Well, it's 500 megawatts of power.
Yeah.
Right. This is a small city. Right. If anybody does the math, it's one house per car, full on. Wow. Is what a supercharger takes. So this isn't light. LEDs are the same, right? The brighter they get, the more they suck. Hours. So that's good.
Yeah, no, I want to thank you definitely for coming here and being the first guest in our studio for the podcast. But coming here to Brookings, you were here this week though, visiting things. Can you give us maybe a quick recap of how everything went?
Yes. I mean, we went through a crazy tour through this wonderful factory, and just the history here, right? The history of, and that's kind of some of my history, right? You had two guys that went to school here and, kind of tinkered with stuff. Someone drove by them and asked them for something to do, and they started tinkering and making stuff. Right?
Yep, we need help with stuff.
And they made everything from voting boards to a wrestling mat thing, which is like, wow. This is pretty diverse, but that's what they do, and then it grows, right? They just grew it to someone needs more expertise in this area, and they just kept doing it, and that science is really, really important. The key to this here in Brookings is far than anything I've seen in any kind of vertical of those technology. If I look at the the cameras when they fail, if I look at the stuff, all this mission critical stuff, the servers, we don't even get data from HP on when their server fails. We have to send it back to some sort of lab and do this stuff. Here, scan a code. I know where the LED was. I know what resistor went into it. I know what lot it came into, and if that lot's a bad lot, we can go back to the manufacturer and do it. Even when you go through things like, power supplies. Power supplies aren't your power supplies in some cases. So they're made by, Meanwell, which is one of the best power supplies in the world. But what you do is make sure when you institute change, you test those and send back the data to the manufacturer, and your contracts are written that they can't change anything without you knowing, because they're essentially wrecking your mission critical. And the statement you're saying that, hi, we test all the stuff, we have all the data, but if you institute change into the thing, then your data's no good, right? And you uphold those type of people, and the litmus test for that is second to none. It's unbelievable.
Because you got to see the reliability lab. I know that's always I'll say a fan favorite, but when people come here to see what's done in there, but
yeah, I mean, there's nothing like putting some LED underwater and making it run with electricity and having no rules. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Did you want to tinker with stuff?
Yeah. I asked if I could take a picture just so I could take one of those at home, maybe put it in my bathtub, run some electricity and do that, some salt water, But there's also some things taking back in that they also realize those type of scientists, even though their brains at a different level and very focused on that level, is that the real life can't create it. I've gone through 7 hurricanes, right, with casinos, and you cannot understand until you hit a Cat 4. I'm happy to hang around till Cat 4.5. After that, anybody that stays in a Cat 5 is crazy, right? And you won't last. There's not a structure that can do it. It doesn't matter what the engineer says, something's going to go wrong. And these engineers that you have here understand that there's nothing like putting something out in the middle of the desert because there's rain, there's salt water, there's stuff, and put a LED display outside and hang it in the Bahamas. We'll see what happens, right? You can't create that in the lab, and they realize that, so they try and create those conditions that make it as clear as we can do, or feed back that stuff from the live field and bring it back in to make that happen. And that's smart. That's just plain smart. It's understanding real life, even though we've all been there where someone's built something and they're a rocket scientist, but the rocket's never flying. Let's be serious. So they got some great people that do that, and it's huge.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming today and sharing all of your insights into what you've been doing and hearing how you went to the Bahamas from Canada and all that interesting story of how you got to where you are today and sharing your insights into the industry for us with the technology and everything you're working with. So thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. We didn't even get to Dubai and Cuba, so next time maybe.
Yeah, we can do a part 2.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll go for a tour.
Yeah, it sounds like you need another tour when you come.
I think we can go for a tour. Mic me up and we'll go down there and see what you guys got.
All right.
Sounds great.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Take care.